Alright, what's up, Dragon Brood? We're gonna do a little bit of something. Oh yeah, if you notice this, I'm still in my last day in LA, so I wanted to bring you something a little bit different before we get back to normally scheduled content. And I wanted to offer you 5 different decks you can play in the post-ban meta that aren't necessarily decks you would think of right off the top. So let's go get into these 5 decks, and hopefully you'll have something different to play by the end of this video. Alright, and a quick reminder before we get into these deck lists, if you would like to order any of these cards, if you want to build these, you're going to get them in paper, go to coolstuffinc.com. Huge supporters of the channel, and they've got really sweet stuff over there. And not only that, you can save 5% on your order using code DRAGON at checkout. And remember, Cool Stuff Inc. always has cool stuff in stock. Also, these deck lists are all going to be available for download on Moxfield if you want to check those out. And you can get all the other deck lists I keep on there as well. So hopping into this first list, I want to get into a Golgari mid-range list that we had. I called it Golgari Scavengers. And what this deck list is good for is that it has a ton of removal. So you're not going to be worried about stuff like mono red or the mono white soldiers or things like that. And the things you have are also large and problematic. You know, because here you're talking about we have cut downs, we've got Go for the Throats, and stuff like Shieldred's Edict, but we also have Bushwhacks, which works very well as a fight spell with something like Phyrexian Obliterator, which is really good. You also have Glissa, which is very hard to deal with because it has Death Strike, Death Touch, and First Strike. Oh my god, it's been a long weekend. And we even get to play Terra Sunder, so we can deal with pretty much all types of permanents your opponent plays, and the creatures you have are big and problematic. We're still getting to play Shieldred, which is a problem, and we're getting to play the larger or newer Shieldred as well. So you really just had no issues keeping things off the board with this list. There's a couple of like counterspell type decks that could be problematic for this, but all of our creatures are so good individually. Even things like for a Graveyard Trespasser, which is good here. But the card that really set this off for me was Golgari Scavengers. Between this and the Trespassers, you're able to remove all types of stuff from your opponent's graveyard, so you don't even care about the Atraxa decks that much. And with the Scavengers, you're able to steal abilities from things like Glissa, so you can have another first striking Death Toucher. We also have Death Touch here. We've got Menace from the big Shieldred. We've got Trample from the Obliterator. So we have all kinds of things going on here that just make this deck very useful overall, and it plays differently than a lot of things you run into on the ladder. Now this next one is a Sultai Planeswalker deck, and I originally built this to try and take advantage of Ichormoon Gauntlet, but it turns out that was kind of like the weakest card in the deck, and I didn't really want it that much. And the deck did very well in games where we never even got it, which was great. So that made room for a couple other cards. And this allows us to play things like Experimental Augury that also have Proliferate, which is really good for keeping more counters on our Planeswalkers. Same thing can be said here of Serum Snare to just buy us more time. Obviously, Drown and Ichor as well, which is really good as a removal. So we just get to play a pile of really good cards here, which I was a huge fan of. Even something like Vincer is really nice because I don't get to play this in other lists. And you get to proliferate, and when you do, you get to do extra abilities here. So just like tons of really good stuff. Getting to use even Wrenn and Realmbreaker, so our mana is easier. Getting to use Liliana, slow the opponent down. Like stuff that's making tokens. Like this is just a really good pile of Planeswalkers that I really enjoyed playing with. And I never felt like we were out of any of the games, right? And having each Planeswalker making tokens is just a constant problem for the opponent, on top of just having extra abilities when you're not making the tokens. And we never had a problem getting to where we could threaten ultimate or near ultimate with a lot of these, and just had an endless slew of cards as well, because Teferi draws, Kalitas draws, Sorin draws, right? Just like it was on top of just value on top of value. Like this was actually a surprisingly fun one, and I don't play a ton of control decks on my channel, but this is one that did very well, and it was entertaining for a control type deck. So if you're looking at putting your foot into a mid-range or control style deck and you don't normally play that, you're an aggro player, this could be a good first step in that direction. And I apologize for the echo, y'all. I'm in a Airbnb that is pretty bare, so my voice is echoing off the walls. But in this one, we have Selesnya Counters. And it might be kind of surprising to see this one on the list, because it is susceptible to sweepers and whatnot, but though we do play a Planeswalker in here, I think if you are worried about sweepers with this list or heavy control or whatever, you could play a second Elspeth, or Archangel Elspeth particularly. I think this could actually be fine to solve some of those problems. And what I like about it is you can just generate soldier tokens over and over, right? And once you're where you need to be, then you can jump them or give them flying and do whatever you want. But the fun thing here is we do have a lot of cards. Like, we do have good early plays, obviously, things that are putting counters on themselves. But Dustleys and Duelists, we have a few ways to put counters on that so we can get extra cards. We obviously have Ozolith to double up our counters, Botanical Brawler, we've got Kami of Whispered Hope. And then we're playing Simian Simulacrum, which is really nice, but also Clay Champion. Clay Champion is really kind of the winner in this list. It's a good top deck just to have a really big creature. When you have something like Botanical Brawler out, and you use this to put counters on two things, now this can get two more counters, and you just have this huge attack coming through. And I think what surprises people with this deck is you can go from very little damage to lethal in the stretch of a turn or two, which is super awesome. And it's very easy to play. So if you're looking at building something kind of in this space, but you didn't know what to do, this was the, at least post-banning, the most consistent version of this I think I could play. And additionally, this is another one that if you think you're running into a lot of mono red or mono white, like, this solves a lot of those problems, just letting you get really big creatures that are hard for your opponent to deal with. And you could even play an extra Elspeth. Matter of fact, I would even say if you wanted to play this list, cutting a champion for an Elspeth, or even cutting out one of these other smaller cards. We don't have that much removal, so it's kind of hard to want to say cut the Fateful Absence, but would be totally reasonable if you wanted to cut one or one of your 3-drops to play another Archangel Elspeth. Because I think just that extra human token or soldier token plus those extra +1s are enough to really send this deck over the top, and you could probably really enjoy playing this one. But again, this is one that is fairly easy to play, it's really fun, and your games are really fast. So depending on what you're looking for, this could be the deck you're looking to play as well. Now, this one is what people are going to refer to as Esper Legends or Esper Aggro. And you might be surprised that I added this one to the list as being a slightly different deck. But for whatever reason, this is a deck that seems like it fell off, and I'm not even running into it except for maybe once every, I don't know, the last couple of times has been like once a week on the ladder, which is a little bit surprising. But what's cool about this deck is it's actually very fast and very resilient. It's just like, it's hard for your opponent to just get through the good draws on this deck. You know, an early Elspeth followed by Rafine is actually really strong. But even if you just play an Adeline behind it, that's great. And you have ways to draw tons of cards between Rafine and Gix. You know, Shieldred's still a problem. You're getting extra cards with Rona, which is really good. Even if you never flip Rona, like, the front side's totally fine. You've got stuff, big finishers like the Dawn Sky. Like, you're just checking a lot of boxes. And you even get to play multiples of the legendary lands and just get extra value out of them, almost like bonus spells, while your deck is just chock full of creatures. I mean, we only really have, what, 6 spells, I think? 3 make disappear and 3 go for the third of this. And otherwise, this is just a big fat creature deck. And it gets the job done still. I was really surprised how consistent this deck still is, with people not really playing it on the ladder right now. And I say go for it. Like, if I were to still be playing, like, as far as just for ranking, not for making content, I would probably still play something like this. This was a fun list, and it was really resilient and seemed to have quite a few answers for different things. So, yeah, don't have much to hate on this list. And I'm kind of a fan of Ratadrapic, right? Whenever you get a chance to play this, and it makes sense, this is great. And it kind of functions as sweeper defense in some ways, because they do just sweep the board. Then great, you get a bunch of tokens, you get to keep fighting and kill the opponent. So yeah, overall, this deck is very good, very hard to deal with. And I will say, the downside to this is it's chock full of rares, right? If you are low on rares and mythics, this is going to be a difficult one. But the good news is a lot of these cards are cards you would play in other lists, so you're not going to feel that bad if you have to spend wild cards on it. And then the deck rounding out my 5 here is that really awkward deck of 4-color vampires. Now, I didn't think this deck was going to be all that great when I played it, but we recently did a video on this one and it surprised me. And it's kind of like the whole reason I wanted to do this video, that there's a large chunk of decks with cards you don't see much of that you can still play today, which is totally relevant. But when we're sitting here with like cut downs, you know, you get to go with the early removal, the same thing with Go for the Throat. You know, we've still got Harvester in here, and just tons of ways to see cards, right? We've got Welcoming Vampire, you've got the blood tokens you're going to be making off these guys. You do have the wonderful way to pump your creatures, and I think pumping the creatures is kind of the key here because you have the Socialite. You also have Markov Baron, which is a new card. This pumps your creatures as well. And then on top of that, you also have Edgar. And I think this is the thing that was setting this off for me in a lot of games, is that you had so many cards that were pumping other cards. So we rarely had just like a 1-1 sitting on the table. It was always 2-2 or 3-3. Like, even this not being able to draw cards that often, when it's not drawing cards, that means you're doing well because all the creatures are big. And when they're not, you're getting to draw cards to get you to where they're big. Also, stuff like Corpse Appraiser being like a pseudo tutor is also really good for this list. Anja as a finisher is really nice. It's just like all around, just really quality stuff. And this has been the first vampire list I can say I've felt like really confident in recommending in a while. And that really surprises me. So the most surprising one on the list is definitely 4-color vampires, because one, I wasn't even totally sure it was going to work. And then two, it worked out way better than expected. And it's a list that has some life gain, it has some direct damage, it's got, you know, some discard with the 2 duresses, it's got lots of creature kill spells, it's got resistance to sweepers when you've got Edgar and a Sorin in here. So just a lot of really good stuff this list is doing, and it actually held up and played well against a variety of decks. So as you can see, there's a variety of things you can still play in this standard, but I want to know what you are doing well right now post bans, because there's a whole lot of decks that still be played and I probably don't know what they are, and if you have something sweet, I want to see it so I can make a video for it and we can talk about it. But that's it. That's all I have for you for now. We'll see you next time.